Lululemon, I love to talk about Lululemon, and they've had a really good week this week, so they have really positive news. They reported really strong holiday sales, and they raised their guidance, actually kind of the opposite narrative of what we saw from Target. So it's funny because we called them both retail winners, I'd say, in 2019, but it seems like moving forward in 2020, Lulu will still be a winner. It seems like they're doing really well, and actually their holiday sales were highlighted by women's, men's, and international sales, so I think a lot of times we talk about how men's has done so strong, but it seems like really on all cylinders they're firing away. They're doing a great job. So Megan, I'm curious to see what your data has on Lulu.
Yeah, so when we look at Lululemon, we're focusing in on their purchase intent specifically. We're listening for mentions of consumers who are purchasing, their branded items, whether it's their apparel or some new products that they've launched. And what we see overall, you can see a nice seasonality pattern to Lulu's chart. The green line is their purchase intent mentions, and we see that demand kind of slowing. We would expect that big seasonal peak right as 2020 is kicking off, and it's down a little bit. It's down about 11% year over year. Meanwhile, the stock is at all-time highs. It's up 59%. I think that it's up 8% since their last earnings even. So in general, we think that demand is slowing down, but this could be attributed to the fact that they're such an established brand now. They're no longer this hot new trend that every time you go out, you might tweet about the first time you buy Lululemon, maybe not the fourth or fifth time. So I think that, Lulu's shown in their reporting that they're a strong brand. They have, they're saturating the market, but for first time buyers, that initial, shock factor and demand is slowing down on our data.
Hey, Megan, that's really interesting. Do you have any kind of indication of male versus female buyers? I know we've kind of thought of this as a female-dominated company for a while, but like Jenny said, there's a lot of guys that are wearing the clothing now, and I'll put myself in that category, right?
You can put me in there too.
And it's great. Do you see any kind of any difference kind of in your data between male and female tweeting and thinking about the purchase intent?
It's interesting. We don't segment tweets by demographics, or especially not necessarily by gender, but what we can look at is people talking about buying the Lululemon line or making references to products that are only sold in the Lululemon line. And that's definitely very relevant, and that's definitely been growing from the first time that they were, when they first established themselves. One thing we're not going to have as much insight to is that international component that Jenny mentioned. We're listening to these English English tweets. So, we have a really good insight into, North America and other English-speaking markets, but less insight to the international markets.
Megan, I know that you guys are often tracking happiness across these brands. Lululemon's one that comes to mind for me as a really strong brand that has, a lot of loyal followers of not only its products, but really what the brand stands for in kind of the wellness space. Do you track happiness at all within this company?
Yeah, we do. And from a happiness perspective, I think you nailed it. They have extremely loyal customers. Their happiness is, I think, around 76% positive, which is pretty strong for a clothing brand, and it's never fallen below 70. So I think that, they're building a loyal consumer base, and they're able to get consumers to pay high dollar for high quality. I think that, this perception of quality is something we see a lot when we look at the tweets. And so that's definitely something that they have going for them. But from a demand perspective, it's hard for us not to note that slowdown.
Okay, so Megan and Alex, you both mentioned this brand loyalty that actually goes perfectly into my first tweet, which is from Brittany Terry, who says, just dropped $300 at Lululemon. I blacked out. So Megan, we were laughing before the break. We were talking about how this has happened to all three of us. I mean, it just seems like no matter what I do, I spend at least $200 in that store. It's easy. I mean, a pair of yoga pants is $100 to start. But I think that this is so funny because it's happened to all of us. I mean, the price point, it seems like with Lulu doesn't really matter. Do you see at all like the price affecting happiness? Because Lululemon is not cheap. We haven't even talked about that.
Yeah, what's interesting is people love to talk about giving or receiving Lululemon, especially, whenever we look at the holiday season. We saw a ton of mentions of people being so excited that they got a pair of Lululemon for Christmas, or they were going to give a pair. And so I think that there is a really high perception of quality. There's definitely an acknowledgement of price, but actually whenever I was looking at some tweets yesterday, a lot of people that talked about that they received Lululemon, they were like, oh my goodness, I never would have initially bought this for myself, but now I see it, I get it. Like, these are awesome pants. So I think that that's promising that they're not having to discount per se.
Question for you, Megan. So the big story with Lulu all along, and really this has been over like the last 3 years, let's say, is, how much more can this company show to kind of keep this run going? It's been an incredible run on the stock price over the last, I really say 3 years of almost straight up and to the right on the chart. And you started to see, your data maybe not pace as well with the stock price. Are you guys at all concerned yet in the valuation of Lululemon, or is this one that it's just tough to bet against?
It has proven pretty tough for us to bet against. I think the last few earnings seasons we've come out betting against Lulu. I think the last earnings, they did fall around like 2%, something like that after the last earnings. But technically, they're up. It's at all-time highs, and that run is why we're seeing a little bit of a bearish divergence in our purchase intent data for sure. But you can't deny the popularity of the brand, that the consumers love the brand. But at some point, like you mentioned, at what point is it overvalued?
Right, and I love to see Jeff Mackey is one of those names on Twitter that he's a huge bull on Lulu, and I love after every earnings, it seems like he's tweeting like, I told you so, because it seems like no matter what we do, they just keep beating on earnings. They keep having really strong reports, and these holiday sales were, of course, really positive. So Jeff Mackey is a good follow for Lululemon. But our next tweet says, the future of retail is not likely in companies Macy's or Bed Bath & Beyond. Some folks will have you believe that Amazon will soon be all that's left. So why was Lululemon up 90% in 2019 and hit more all-time highs this week? So I thought this was so funny because Lulu is truly Amazon proof. I mean, we've seen the run into Amazon, we've seen the run in Lulu. It seems like they're not really interchangeable. I mean, they're kind of two totally different companies. It's hard to compare them, but Lulu has also avoided the death of the mall, because most of the Lulus, at least the ones I go to, are standalone.
Well, the one thing, Megan, on Lulu in particular, is they really focused on building out their e-commerce and their direct-to-consumer. They're not really, as far as I know, using any third-party retailers to sell their products. This is a little bit different than the legacy companies, even like a Nike, which I think is probably their closest competitor in terms of like the athleisure wear. But when you're looking at where trends are going, and I know that you're following that kind of stuff, how important is it that this is really where things are going, that direct-to-consumer movement? I know that Andy's been on here and talked about how much that affects companies like Foot Locker, but is it setting up pretty badly for the Macy's and the Bed Bath & Beyonds of the world when everything's kind of working its way towards this? And then you also have, of course, Amazon lurking in the background.
Yeah, I think that, Lulu has positioned themselves very well, that, like you said, you can go to a mall or a store, but you can just order online, and they're completely controlling that whole experience. They're controlling the environment, whether you're in store, whether you're ordering, even on your mobile device. And so I think that perception of quality, they're able to control that and keep it consistent. And so for them, they're executing really well in that realm. I think that Nike is even, they're trying to move more to a direct-to-consumer, and that's why we're, watching Foot Locker with a little bit more of a bearish lens, because we see that consumers are willing to seek out directly the brands that they care about, that they like, and that they perceive as high quality.